Shalom, I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to be sharing with you regarding the current status of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. And an overview is as follows. In order to encourage the Palestinians to enter into direct negotiations and also to deflect criticism that Israel may be the obstacle to having and restarting direct peace talks with the Palestinians, Israel, in the last several weeks, has agreed to a series of goodwill gestures toward the Palestinians. However, the Palestinians refused to make any reciprocal goodwill steps toward Israel. Instead, the Palestinians are more interested in getting recognition of a Palestinian state based upon 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital at the United Nations through the General Assembly. In doing so, the Palestinians would get their United Nations status upgraded to one of a non-member state, which is the same as the Roman Catholic Church. The Arab League has agreed to support the Palestinians in their effort to go to the UN General Assembly. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is scheduled to address the United Nations General Assembly at their annual meeting on September the 27th. The date for presenting the application to the UN General Assembly will be made by a special meeting of the Arab League, which is scheduled to take place on September the 5th. Mahmoud Abbas will file the application. The United States Secretary of State Hillary Clinton warned Mahmoud Abbas recently that if the Palestinians sought a bid before the U.S. elections, the Palestinian Authority would be subject to political and economic sanctions. In an interview with Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney, Wolf Blitzer of CNN indicated that all U.S. presidential administrations, beginning with Lyndon Johnson in 1967 to the current Obama administration, views East Jerusalem as being occupied in non-recognition that Jerusalem is the united capital of Israel. Therefore, the United States doesn't oppose a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital, but for the United States, it's more of an issue of the method and the timing to achieve that goal. Even as the United States has sought direct negotiations and a comprehensive negotiated final status settlement as the end result of talks between Israel and the Palestinians that have gone on for nearly the past 20 years. In their expected bid to the United Nations and requesting the United Nations General Assembly to vote on the issue, the Palestinians believe that there are now 130 to 140 countries that will vote in favor of recognizing a Palestinian state based upon East Jerusalem as its capital. So the proposal, if voted on, is expected to pass, and it is believed that the United Nations General Assembly will in fact vote on the issue by the end of 2012. And quoting Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad Malki, he told reporters in Ramallah, "In the year 2012, we will achieve a Palestinian state that enjoys the status of being a non-member of the United Nations. After achieving this goal, the Palestinians plan to ask the UN Security Council to recognize a Palestinian state based upon 67 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. And if Obama gets reelected, and if he's willing to make that proposal through the UN Security Council, then the Palestinians would have the status of a full member of the United Nations. And if this scenario takes place, I believe that that would be the fulfillment of the prophecy of dividing the land of Israel and the city of Jerusalem. Thus, it would be a sign that we would be in the tribulation." So before we wrap up sharing with you the situation regarding the peace process, at this time I would like to share with you an interview that CNN's Wolf Blitzer conducted with Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney in Jerusalem, where he asks Romney regarding his views on Jerusalem being the capital of Israel, a Palestinian state being created with East Jerusalem as its capital, and his views regarding accepting the principle of a two-state solution. What I want you to pay particular attention when I play this clip for you is Wolf Blitzer admitting that it has been the policy of U.S. administrations beginning with Lyndon Johnson in 1967 through the current Obama administration that they regard East Jerusalem as being occupied and thus do not recognize Jerusalem as the united capital of Israel. So at this time we're going to share with you this interview that Wolf Blitzer conducted with Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney.
Today we're coming to you live from CNN's Jerusalem Bureau. We begin this hour with my one-on-one interview with the Republican presidential candidate. Governor Romney, thanks so much for joining us in Jerusalem. What a beautiful city, and I'm sure you've been moved by what you've seen so far, because you know that every U.S. president since '67, since the Six-Day War in 1967, behind you is the old city of Jerusalem. You see the beautiful walls there. The pre-'67 line was in front of those old walls. But since then, every president from Nixon to LBJ to Carter, Ronald Reagan, the Bushes, President Clinton, now Obama, considers East Jerusalem, including the old city behind you, to be occupied territory, not part of Israel. Would you change that?
Did you hear? Did you comprehend what CNN's Wolf Blitzer said in describing the policy of U.S. administrations beginning with Lyndon Johnson in 1967 to the current administration of Barack Obama, that each administration regarded East Jerusalem as being occupied? In other words, not recognizing Jerusalem as the united capital of Israel. Do you realize that in the 1992 Democratic platform that it stated that Jerusalem was the united capital of Israel? Do you realize Barack Obama, before he got elected in 2008, said Jerusalem is the united capital of Israel? Yet, Wolf Blitzer said that it has been the policy of U.S. administrations beginning with Lyndon Johnson in 1967 through the current administration of Barack Obama that they regarded East Jerusalem as being occupied. Let's hear that statement from Wolf Blitzer once again.
Because you know that every U.S. president since '67, since the Six-Day War in 1967, behind you is the old city of Jerusalem. You see the beautiful walls there. But the pre-'67 line was in front of those old walls. But since then, every president from Nixon to LBJ to Carter, Ronald Reagan, the Bushes, President Clinton, now Obama, considers East Jerusalem, including the old city behind you, to be occupied territory, not part of Israel. Would you change that?
Therefore, by viewing East Jerusalem as being occupied, each U.S. administration, in effect, was in favor of dividing Jerusalem in any eventual peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. However, those U.S. administrations did not want the dividing of Jerusalem to be dictated, but preferred instead for Israel to agree to it, thus make the claim that the dividing of Jerusalem was the outcome of negotiations. Notice in Republican candidate Romney giving his answer to Wolf Blitzer, he says that the current situation is a negotiating posture that is taken by Israel, knowing that the end result will be different. Once again, Governor Romney, in stating his support for a two-state solution, is in effect stating his favor of the dividing of Jerusalem. He just wants it to be done through negotiations and not force Israel to take a stance of what the ultimate outcome might be in the very beginning of the negotiations.
I'm not going to talk about the borders, the decision as to where the borders would be as we move to a two-state solution, which I support. That's a decision on borders that will be worked out by the Israelis and the Palestinians.
So you support a two-state solution?
Starting point is something which will be decided by the parties involved. What the ending point is will be decided by the parties involved.
Could you see the future Palestinian state having East Jerusalem as its capital?
My view is that the right course for America is to stand by our ally, Israel, to support them in their negotiating posture. I recognize that as negotiations begin, the postures of the respective parties will be different than the ultimate solution. But I'm not going to give up Israeli bargaining positions from the beginning, nor demand of the Palestinians a certain outcome.
It is well documented that Barack Obama has not gotten along with Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over the course of Obama and Netanyahu serving their terms in office. Given that the Palestinians are now deciding to go to the UN General Assembly to seek recognition of a Palestinian state based upon 67 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, and in doing so, they will become a non-member state of the United Nations, because in order to be recognized as a full state, it must be approved by the United Nations Security Council. Is it possible that if the United Nations General Assembly does indeed vote to recognize the Palestinian state and to divide Jerusalem, that if Barack Obama gets re-elected, would he be willing in those circumstances to make a recommendation before the United Nations Security Council that there needs to be a definition of borders, that the outcome of talks is a two-state solution, an Israeli state, a Palestinian state, and the Palestinian state would have East Jerusalem as its capital? Is it possible then that Barack Obama, if he gets reelected, would make that recommendation and want that acknowledgement through the UN Security Council after the election, when he would not have to be concerned about re-election anymore? Would President Obama, in a possible second term, dictate the borders of a Palestinian state? Would he dictate the dividing of Jerusalem? Now, given that Wolf Blitzer has stated that it has been the policy of successive U.S. administrations since Johnson in 1967 through Obama's first term to regard East Jerusalem as being occupied, will Barack Obama, in a possible second term, then formally state that and dictate that that be the case without Israel willingly agreeing to that through negotiations? Of course, we know the answer is only time will tell. One thing we do know is that if the United Nations General Assembly votes to recognize a Palestinian state based upon 67 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, and if that is followed up by Obama in a second term recommending that the UN Security Council recognize a Palestinian state based upon 67 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital as well, I believe that this would fulfill the prophecy of the tribulation period, that the nations would divide the land of Israel and the city of Jerusalem. Now, whether that happens or not, only time will tell. Well, that concludes this week's update, where we shared with you the current situation with the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Until we do it again, Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.